I was going through my early morning routine this morning. I woke up unusually early, about 3 a.m. And as I was going through this routine, something odd struck me about a title of an article that I had seen, probably on Reddit, but I'm not sure, about some Southeast Asian nations being concerned about getting enough young men for their militaries. With demographic collapse, with the demographies collapsing at the rate they are in some of those countries, this is an ongoing concern. And that got me thinking about some other things. So, hi, my name is Steve, and this is Awake with Steve, where I talk about things that keep me up at night, or in this case, wake me up early in the morning, and get my mind racing. So let's take a look at the effect of demographic collapse on military prospects. And the topic that got me started was Southeast Asian nations not having enough manpower to maintain their military strength, basically. And that got me thinking about the two big countries that have this problem, China and Russia. And I kind of want to focus in on Russia, my thoughts on Russia today. And this is entirely speculation on my part, but it adds an extra element into the war in Ukraine. Okay. Most of the reports that I've seen on demographic collapse in Russia and in China also is the collapse of the dominant ethnicity in the two nations. So we're looking at ethnic Russians, the European Slavic Russians around Moscow, and in Europe, in Russia, and the Han in China. These two ethnicities are collapsing at the fastest rate in their areas. Some of the other ethnicities aren't collapsing that fast, or possibly not even collapsing, maybe still growing. Focusing on Russia, let's look at the the Eastern Asian and Central Asian populations that live in Eastern Russia. They're growing. They're a small percentage of the people there, but they're growing. And yes, their rate of growth is slowing down. But it could easily be seen that there would be a time when these ethnicities might be the dominant, be the largest part of the population. So I got to thinking about that and how that might reflect on the Ukrainian war. I've always thought about the conflict in the Ukraine. What Russia got out of it. Okay, you talk to Peter Zion, and Russia's trying to expand its borders to get to a defensible place. Okay, fine. But also, Ukraine, the breadbasket of Russia. A lot of grains, a lot of agriculture there, agricultural produce that Russia can use. There's oil in the eastern part of the country and in the Black Sea and around there, around Crimea. Eastern Ukraine is also an industrial zone with its own set of industries and minerals. So definitely something to be prized by Russia. Now there's a couple of other things too. Ethnic Russians. Russia could more than double its population of ethnic Russians if it absorbed Ukraine. That would be comforting to Russia. They would rather have Ukrainians, and in fact in the past Ukrainians have been a substantial portion of the leadership of Russia, as opposed to Far Eastern ethnicities. But here's where it gets interesting. I kind of thought, so far it's all been part of stuff I've thought about in the past, and almost said, yeah, that's obvious. But this I haven't thought. This is new. Russia has an ethnic population of Russians that is decreasing rapidly. It has multiple ethnicities in the eastern part and the southern part of the country that are not Russians. Not only they're not Russians, many of them are Muslims. Okay, and these minority or eastern populations, southern populations, are growing, still growing in population, although the rate of growth is slowing down and may even have started to reverse, but it's still growing. So what they have is a population of young men, and young men are always troublesome, especially in states and countries where there isn't a lot of opportunities for them. And Russia is one of those countries where suppression is more important than economic prosperity. So, and it's further aggravated because a large percentage of the population is Muslim. So right there, we have young men unhappy with where they're at, looking for a cause, and they have it in their religion, in Islam. So, how do you deal with that? You know, the Russian population, the ethnic Russians, they don't, have that type of philosophy. They're fairly well off economically. They control the government apparatus. So they're happy. They're relatively happy with that. And they don't want these newcomers, these up-and-comers, taking what they have away from them. So what do? You start a war. It's been in all of the opinion pieces and many of the news articles that I've read about where Russia is getting the manpower for its army that it's using in Ukraine. And it's coming from the hinterlands, from the borderlands, from places other than the main Russian ethnicities. Because they don't want to upset the people that support the government. Those people out in the hinterlands, they're not quite as supportive of the Russian government, maybe. Definitely young agitators. Definitely there have been instances of Islamic terrorism in Russia. So, what do you do with these people? You start a war, and you send them off. And your favorite battle technique becomes human waves. You just want those people. You just want those young troublemakers from the hinterlands to die. That seems awfully terrible. It's a terrible way to think about it. But it's Russia. Russians historically have preferred human waves in battles. They tend to lose a lot of men before they either quit or get their stuff together and become competent in battle. And more often than not, they quit or wait for the Russian winter to finish off their enemy. It's just an interesting observation on my part. But that also puts it in the perspective of there's not a lot of downside for the Russian people. There is downside for Putin's government because Russians don't like to lose wars, and they tend to throw governments out when they've lost a war, especially when it's a very, very embarrassing loss, which this could turn out to be. But on the other hand, they've reduced the number of young troublemakers in the hinterland, in the Muslim lands, and they've been taking children from Ukraine back into Russia, so they can help improve their population there. Interesting. Just a thought process, a thought on my part. I get a little paranoid sometimes and a little really into the dark side of humanity. Get my thinking going there. So, not a cheerful way to start the morning, but there it is. So, we'll talk to you later. Bye.